Welcome back to the Dopesick Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. Also got quite a few stories about the crazy stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid that you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, the real Walter White. There actually was a guy named Walter White, and he actually was this guy's name was John White. Okay, Mr. White, you know, he had some wild stuff going on, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Now, at Petersburg, 40% of the population were chomos. They don't do protection or any of that. I had to explain that to somebody last night. I started out at the low. It's a relatively normal low, but I got in trouble sent to the medium, you know, because it's next door. They don't have to send you somewhere else. And yeah, they did try to send me to Texas, but, you know, I hadn't done anything severe enough to warrant that. But I really hurt this odd little man who was the head of the SIS, which is the prison police. And, yeah, I hurt his feelings. I said something that shattered his, you know, fragile little ego, so he tried to send me out to Texas. And that was a weird medium. But anyhow, when I first got there, I kept a clean-shaved face back then. This was all splotchy, you know what I mean? It didn't grow in right, so I didn't keep a beard. And even now, I'm not trying to go for some type of look. It's just laziness. I mean, for real. I hate fooling with my hair, I hate fooling with it. I hate fooling with it. That's all that is. But where I kept clean-shaved back then, and I was in my 20s, I looked like, you know, a college kid. And, I didn't look like your typical criminal. That's what I'm trying to say. So, some people probably thought I was a chomo. Matter of fact, I'm about positive a good many of them did, until later on, you know, I sat back quiet until I figured out who was who. But during which time, I know they was assuming some stuff. But there was this guy, John White. He looks like he's probably about 60 years old. White hair, horseshoe, bald head, and he worked out this dude, Sweeney. Now I knew a couple Sweeneys, but this Sweeney was a counterfeiter. He'd been in like 22 county jails across the East Coast. He said the worst food he'd ever had, anywhere, in any jail he'd ever been in, was the Western Virginia Regional Jail in Salem, Virginia, where I spent a year and a month. And he's right. It's beyond bad. So anyway, they were best friends, and every morning they'd go do their workout, walk back and forth, do pull-ups, push-ups, you know, do their routine. Now Sweeney, had a bald head, goatee, and he had the best jail tattoos I have ever seen in my life. Okay, he had this sleeve that it was an actual pig with a police uniform on and some other stuff. There was a bill since he was a counterfeiter. And it was done with ink that came out of these markers, like these special markers that the ink would set well in the skin. And they were a popular marker. They'd get sold for a good bit a piece because tattoo artists would use that ink to tattoo in people, and it worked. A lot of times it came out splotchy, didn't come out right. So with this arm, I just stuck with the black and white, you know, or just, you know, I didn't do it because I didn't want that splotchiness, you know. That's all done in a shop. This actually, like 90% of that was done in a county jail with no engine, with a staple. This is burnt shakers and VO5, VO5 shampoo mixed with checkers that were burned down to soot, plucked with a staple. Got a lot of time in this one. But anyhow, Sweeney looked the part. He could easily have been an some sort of Aryan person in some type of movie. If you had central cast and say, send us a crew of Aryan dudes down here, he would have fit that part. Wasn't really with that type of thinking or nothing. There wasn't nothing racist about this dude. That wasn't how he thought. But he looked like, you know, he fit in prison. He had the look, okay, let's just say that. So, seeing John White working out with him, I knew John White wasn't a chomo. And Sweeney is a funny dude. I got some stories about that dude. There was a story about a couple guys holding his cellie down who was a chomo. He was for real chomo. I'll tell more on it later, but they held this dude down and they tattooed a little wiener on the back of his ear. That's not a joke. They really did. I didn't believe him. And he came over and he's like, and he told his roommate, just ordered him, get over here. And then he grabs his head, pulls his head forward and peels it, and his roommate's just like the stuff I have to deal with. I'd reckon so. Shouldn't be interested in, little children, you wouldn't have a little wiener on your ear. Oh, God. But anyhow, I had many conversations with John White. He's from Virginia Beach, so that's why he ended up at Petersburg. It's local, okay? And there was not a particularly heavy presence of speed, of crystal, in, bigger cities back then. It was mostly a country thing or an out west thing. Out west, yeah, that was a thing, but, it wasn't as much of a thing like it is today. Like I was watching To Catch a Smuggler, and they were saying that, crystal's the new weed. Like they're finding just as much of that as they used to find a weed. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane how it's just, blown up like that. Popular culture, it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing how that works. I noticed after, and I don't blame popular culture on anything. Freedom of speech, that comes before any and all, and that is the most important thing, is that we have the right to say whatever we want to say, but that's not what freedom of speech protects. Freedom of speech protects speech you don't like. It means somebody can say something and piss you off as much as they possibly can, and there's not a thing you can do about it. That's what freedom of speech truly is. So say that before I say this. American Gangster. After that, there was a whole bunch of new people doing dope. After Breaking Bad, a whole bunch of new people doing speed. But that's the people's fault for being stupid and falling into that. Myself included. But anyhow, I watched a lot of movies. I thought it was going to be the next George Jones or something. I never watched the end of the movie. I did, but I didn't think about it. Belly, Blow, all these movies, they don't have good endings. Even Requiem for a Dream, man, as depressing as could be. I was watching the getting money parts of these. So, John White knew how to cook and all that, and cook up speed. But it was just more cost efficient to go to California to get it for dirt cheap. And then he would bring it back by airplane. In his luggage, he would carry it back by airplane to Virginia Beach. Yes, that's pretty freaking wild, okay? That was how he re-upped. He would get a plane ticket, and he would fly to California. And, I asked him about, tell me, how did you do that? And he told me he'd get, a thing of water. And then a couple of the water bottles, he would fill it up with as much crystal as he could. Then he'd liquefy it, and he said nobody really looked at it. He said he'd fit it back in there. It looked like it was a new thing, just the water bottles to drink. This is back when you could do that. But if they'd look closely, he said if they'd look real close, they'd have seen that a couple of those bottles looked like they had oil floating in them. It wasn't just sloshing around like regular water. He packed it to the max and liquefied it. I'd done that too to sneak stuff, through before, on larger scale stuff. It's and steam it off basically. The boiling water, piece of plastic over it, put the liquid on top. The boiling water steams it off, turns it back to it. And he was doing some wild stuff out there with that. And there's a common thing that I've seen happen with people like this that become the man, with people knowing where you sleep. And that was one of my major things, was not having people know where I lived. But, I kind of was a couch surfer. I was kind of a homeless drug addict, so that wasn't too hard. But anyhow, if you go re-up in another state, and people know when you're going to go re-up, there's a lot of times when those dealers get robbed. I know a good many times, a good many dealers, it happened regularly. Like every time they'd re-up, shoot, somebody break in their house, steal stuff. Happened to him. He got a security system put in it and some other stuff. The one time the cops kicked in his door, they searched the house for drugs. He didn't have anything. He wasn't in town. He's going to go get more. But they have something called like a money dog, and the money dog smells money. And he had put money in the wall and taken like drywall and built the wall back over it. Dog didn't find his money. They kicked in the door. They've invaded your privacy based on a tip of probably a unreliable drug addict, and they found absolutely nothing. They looked very stupid. So he used that to get his lawyer to get them to back way off of him, and that allowed him to go a little bit wild. He had quit selling for a couple years. Now, this is the messed up thing with the feds and how they do certain stuff. It had been like 2 years, I believe he said, since he quit selling that. He went back. He worked too, on top of selling dope. He had the appearances of a regular working man. So that was part of, how he was able to get him back off too as a lawyer. But he'd quit. Stuff was happening, it was time. But a couple years later, the right people got caught. The right people got arrested. Or should I say the wrong people. In the federal system, it's either, I said it was 2, but I think it's 3. If 3 people say the first person says, I bought an ounce a week off this guy for 10 weeks. Okay? The second guy says he also bought an ounce a week for 10 weeks. The third guy says he bought 2 ounces for 10 weeks. Okay? So that's 40, that's 40 ounces. They total it up. John White never got caught with nothing. He didn't get caught with a dang thing. And, I believe he got a decade, 10 years of his life, smack, federal prison. The laws that the feds impose on people were designed to catch the mafia, who were just so slippery they couldn't catch them in their fingers. And they've been used to exploit everybody else ever since. I understand there are people and there are things that are bad that need to be caught, but their job is to catch you, So they should do a better job catching instead of creating new rules that favor themselves, in my personal opinion. It's kind of a messed up thing, don't endorse or support, selling that type of stuff. It's no good. I'm not saying anything of the sort. But for the types of time certain people get, if it had been state charges, they couldn't have convicted him first off. One of the guys who Pinto and I were talking about the other day, who I'll do another story about him, they have something called an enhancement. So let's say you get caught selling or in possession of something today, and then 5-10 years from now, you get caught selling something again. There's a guy, Fisher, I believe he got caught with like a half an 8 ball. And like a decade later, they found a half pound at his house. They used that to enhance him. And they said, if you cooperate, well, this will be a state case. You'll probably get 5 years. You'll probably do about 4 on it. And, we'll leave it at that. He didn't understand what was happening to him at the time. I don't think he would have done any different. But he told me that he didn't understand the mandatory minimums. So it came to a shock to him when he was in his court date, during which time he'd been in jail. His son was born. The judge sentenced him to the mandatory minimum. The judge has no discretion in that, of 20 years. He held his son for the first time after he was sentenced to 20 years for a half pound of speed. Okay, a half pound is not kingpin amounts. Okay, in his little country town, it was a decent little bit. And yeah, he was hooked in with some serious people. Okay, his dope dealer, he'd meet him on this backcountry road, and they met one time, and his dope dealer said something about the house that was being built there. Well, the house got built. His dope dealer bought that house just because it would be a more convenient place to meet him and another person. That's how big of a guy his dope dealer was. His dope dealer was doing stuff on another level. Would have put his family at risk. He would have probably been witness protection if he'd done anything of the sort, or he'd not be here. I've heard stories about this guy from a few people. He's had people in a van show up and snatch people up, and some very brutal stuff happens to them when they mess with this fella. But anyhow, 20 years for that, messed up the laws they imposed. But anyway, that's about it for this one. John White, Mr. White, and he literally talked like Walter White, like a dorky chemistry teacher. Yeah, he's a good guy. I'm friends with the dude, and God bless him, he had a heart attack, I believe, in prison when he was at the camp. Survived it, got out. Hadn't kept up with him. I need to check and see if I can find him. He was a good dude. He was a good guy. Funny too. You have to catch him, but always smiling. You'd never see this guy not smiling. And he just looked like, I wouldn't say grandpa. He wasn't quite that old, but I mean, he looked like just like a nice, 60-year-old man. You might see in a church service. You might see, just somewhere out. Hello. Like, he looks like the type of person, if he walked by you in public, he'd say, how you doing? Just that type of nice guy. But yeah, he's involved in some stuff, and he was getting some money. He's tied in with some bikers and a whole bunch of other people too, supplying everybody in Virginia Beach for a good minute with that, because it wasn't as popular of a thing. So with him being like the main sole connection, for the most part, he was the man. And you'd never pick this guy. Some idiots put arrest me signs on them, okay? Get them 24-inch rims with the hydraulics and the spinners and all that, and you talk like you have a, third grade education level, and you whenever you go to pay for, a pack of cigarettes or whatever it is you buy inside of a gas station, and you pull out a wad of $10,000, yeah, that's saying arrest me. This guy was not that. This guy was the opposite. He blended in. And unique person. If I could get him on here, you guys won't believe how this guy looks, how this guy talks, and that he was a speed kingpin. But anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, 16 minutes, 22 seconds of your life, and which you'll never get back. And for that, I do apologize, but I hope you did like it. Been a little worn out today. I stayed up doing one of them lives last night. Oh, Lord. They've been getting me with them lives, staying up talking on there. I talk crazy on them now. I keep Jeff Foxworthy clean here. I keep a Richard Pryor dirty there. It's kind of like, Jay Williams come on that a good minute too. Big Weavy, if you ain't seen it, in Vegas Prison Stories. Also Canadian Jail War Story. That's a good dude too. Now, but anyway, it's a bunch of little screens showing each prison YouTuber. And, Jay Williams showing up. That was a big deal. But got some people on there. If it's Wu-Tang Clan, I'm ODB. I'm Old Dirty Bastard. Or WDB. Whatever. But I'm the one who's talking crazy, saying some wild stuff, and I will make you laugh. I will make you laugh. I'm not all that politically correct, but I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. I apologize immediately if I say anything that I feel like was offensive, that was worth apologizing for. There's certain stuff, I'm going to say, and if you don't like it, I don't really care. But I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, like tear anybody down. But anyhow, I'm going to shut up. If you liked it, press the like button.